sloshing water, croaking frogs, chirping insects. Those were the sounds that filled my ears as the kayak lazily floated down the river. Beads of sweat rolled down my forehead as the warm, damp air pressed in around me on all sides. The sun overhead shone through the gaps in the canopy above us. "We almost done, Jared?" I asked tentatively. "Aunt Grace is probably worried sick about where we are by now." "Almost," Jared called back from the front of the kayak, leaning over the side and sticking a long net deep into the murky water. "Just gotta get a few bottom samples to analyze." "Why'd you have to go and rope us into this?" Olivia groaned in the seat in front of me, doing her best to comb her dirty blonde hair back into some semblance of order. Every summer, our entire extended family came to the Atchafalaya Basin for a week of kayaking, grilling, and fishing in the swamp. It was a 3-generation Reed family tradition. Most of the Reeds already lived near Atchafalaya out in Morgan City, but my family had to fly in from Pennsylvania every year. It was nice to see my cousins Jared and Olivia. I never got to see them outside of this one week every year. However, it wasn't worth the puddles of dirty water sloshing around at the bottom of the kayak, or the dozen or so tiny insects currently circling annoyingly close to my face. At least I could take solace in knowing that all of this was Jared's fault. Jared was 25, 8 years older than Olivia and I, and the first of this generation's Reed kids to get a stable job. My mom would never shut up about how great it was that he worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service. I thought it was pretty cool at first, until he decided to use our week of vacation time to do surveys in the greater Atchafalaya Basin, while forcing me and Olivia to help him on the first day. Olivia was the polar opposite of her older brother. While Jared carried himself as a well-spoken, mild-mannered, and serious guy, Olivia was a bit of a live wire. She was always doing something crazy, especially when she wasn't supposed to be. Guidelines say never to survey alone, especially in dangerous areas like Atchafalaya. "What, are you concerned about crocodiles or something?" I chuckled. "Alligators, Zach," Jared snapped back. "Crocodiles don't live in Louisiana, and for your information, yes. I don't think you city folk really appreciate how deadly gators can actually be. You ever seen a video of an alligator death roll? Oh, dude, I'm so scared of an alligator rolling towards me. Nice one. It's not... whatever." We rode in silence for a few more minutes as Jared scooped up more samples from the bottom of the riverbed and put them into a bucket on his lap. "You know, Jared doesn't actually work for the Wildlife Service," Olivia stated casually. "Olivia, shh!" Jared harshly whispered from the front. "I told you that in confidence." "Dude, what? My mom's been talking non-stop about how cool it is that you work for the government. You don't actually do that?" Jared sighed. I mean... I did drag you out here for it. Okay, listen. If you agree to help me out with surveying for the whole week, I'll tell you what I actually do, but you can't tell anyone else, okay? I considered my options for a moment. These detours from the Atchafalaya River and into the wetlands were grueling, but his offer had piqued my curiosity. 3 days, I offered back. 6, Jared responded. 4, and Olivia comes with. Deal. "What the hell, Zach? I never agreed to this!" "Well, the deal's final," Jared said as he clapped his hands together. "Okay, remember, you two can't repeat this to anyone, or I could lose my job. I'm trusting you with this, okay?" I nodded before realizing that he couldn't have seen it because he was sitting in front of me. "Yep, alright." I do work as an ecologist. That part wasn't necessarily a lie, but I don't work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I do technically still work with a government-sponsored group, an energy company that's been expanding into Louisiana over the past few months. "So, if you're working with an energy company, why are you doing an ecological survey?" Olivia questioned. "They're looking to build a new dam or something in Atchafalaya, and to do it, they need to do some wildlife surveys. First of all, they gotta make sure it won't fuck up the local ecosystem too bad. Second of all, they need to check for any invasive species that might mess with the construction or operation of the dam. Invasive species? You guys get those down here? I asked naively. Oh, yeah, all the time. We didn't get that many back in the day, but global warming is shifting all the climates around. A couple species from the Gulf of Mexico are trying to come up into the wetlands, but most of them are held back by the fact that freshwater and saltwater are very different environments. Still, you gotta keep an eye out. Huh, I didn't know that. That's cool. I tried to feign interest, now rapidly regretting my decision to dedicate more than half of the trip to manual labor for a response that wasn't as interesting as I would have hoped. Do you have, like, a kit you have to bring along to survey? Yeah, I've got a whole thing. Most of it's actually back at the cabin. I can show it to you later if you want. Yeah, that'd be cool, actually. I've always wondered what kind of tools you use to do your job. As I said that, Olivia clasped her hands over her ears and leaned forward in pain. You alright, cuz? I called forward tentatively. She stayed quiet for a few seconds, still holding her hands over her ears before taking them away and sitting up straight again. I asked again. You alright, Olivia? Yeah, it's just, tinnitus thing. It's been bothering me the past few months, on and off. Oh, sorry to hear that. I hope it gets better. You know, I think I might actually have something to get rid of your tinnitus. Jared chimed in. No, I'm not sure if I'd actually be allowed to use it like that, so never mind, I guess. Olivia turned to me and we shared a brief look of confusion. Whatever, let's just finish up here and head back, Olivia muttered. It's almost 1, and I'm starving. About 10 minutes later, we managed to navigate our kayak back onto the Atchafalaya River. We started rowing north, back towards the cabin where our families were staying, and something in the environment around us shifted. All at once, the sound of croaking frogs and chirping insects stopped. My ears rang for a moment as the creatures of the swamp entered a nervous, dead silence. Olivia and I stopped paddling, causing our kayak to slowly drift through the water. The sounds of the river, the wind, and the swaying trees were the only noises that permeated the swamp. The feeling that shot through my body was one of irrational fear. The hairs on my neck stood up. The beating of my heart in my chest became deafeningly audible, and my hands began to shake. Jared and Olivia didn't look like they were faring any better. We sat in silence for nearly 30 seconds, before the sounds of the swamp suddenly resumed. What the fuck was that? I questioned. I don't actually know, Jared stated. If I had to guess, the animals were probably reacting to, some kind of change in the environment, or more likely some kind of predator. Maybe an eagle flew overhead or something. Or they were reacting to us, Olivia chimed in. They do say man is more dangerous to nature than the other way around or something. I didn't have to see Jared's face to know that he rolled his eyes in response. We got back to the cabin about 40 minutes later. As expected, lunch was winding down and there were only a few hot dogs left on the grill. Dylan and the other younger cousins were still running around outside and hitting each other with sticks, but most of the adults aside from Aunt Grace had gone inside. Dylan, be nicer to your brother, she called over as we walked up behind her. She turned around to see the three of us and a warm smile crossed her face, though I could see a hint of concern under it. Hey, you three, how'd it go? Went alright, Jared responded. Got all the data I needed for today, and these two were a good help. We're gonna grab a bite. Jared went to walk past her, but she put her arm out to stop him. Hold on a sec. A before you head back inside, did you see your father while you were out? Nah, why? Olivia spoke up. He hasn't gotten back yet. He was just going south to find some firewood. He should have been back by now. That's weird, I commented. I'm sure he's fine. If a gator got Uncle Jim, he'd just snap its neck or something. Grace chuckled nervously at that. Though she tried to hide it, I could tell she was worried about her missing husband. The rest of the day was fairly uneventful. I played with the younger kids a bit, played a little bit of Pokemon Y on my DS, took a shower, and helped grill the chicken burgers we'd be having for dinner. Once dinner time came around, I was relegated to the back of the line at the grill, even though I had helped cook it. It seemed a little unfair to me, but I wasn't exactly in the mood to argue. I grabbed my burger from the grill and filled up a cup with some fries as mosquitoes buzzed around me. I must have swatted at least 3 or 4 of them while grabbing my food, which made sense, considering the grill was maybe 15 feet away from the river. I turned around, walking away from the river and back towards the cabin as I scanned the picnic table set up in between those 2 locations. As I set my eyes on an empty table next to the cabin, far away from the annoying kids' table, my foot connected with something. I stumbled about 5 steps forward, nearly spilling my food all over the muddy ground, but managed to right myself. I spun around to try and figure out what I tripped on, but there was nothing there. The ground was practically perfectly flat. I shook off the small amount of adrenaline rushing through my body, assuming that it had just been a case of me being clumsy, and walked over to my chosen table. The burger was pretty good, though the crinkle-cut fries left something to be desired. I wasn't gonna complain about food, though. This wasn't a restaurant, it was a family barbecue. I glanced up at my surroundings as I ate. I wasn't that big of a fan of the swamp, but even I had to admit the cypress trees above us looked hauntingly beautiful in the orange light of the setting sun. I could begin to see the glow of a few solitary fireflies gliding across the canopy. I was quickly jolted from my appreciation of nature by the sound of a heavy object slamming down onto the picnic table. I glanced down quickly to see Jared holding the handle of a large metal container that looked similar to a tackle box. The box had been painted a dark gray, though the edges and top of the lid had been painted a light orange. He sat down quietly, setting the plate of food in his other hand on the table. Cool, right? He gestured to it with his free hand. Hell is that? I inquired. Looks like some kind of bait box or something. This is part of my equipment. It's basically a specially made first aid kit with some more advanced features. Jared performed air quotes as he said the word advanced. I reached to open it and he quickly slapped my hand away. No. Don't open it. The stuff inside is, it's basically a cooler. Some of the stuff inside of it will go bad quickly if it's not kept at a constant low temperature. What kind of stuff? I tilted my head to the side curiously. Jared waved his hand in the air. Antivenoms, blood bags, certain clotting agents, stuff like that. I think. I'm not actually sure what's in it, but it's like really expensive medical stuff. So why the hell do you have it? Jared leaned closer to me. I'm actually supposed to deliver it to someone who will be showing up at the cabin tomorrow. It's super important that I hold on to it. I thought you were out here to do a wildlife survey, not hold on to some kind of state-of-the-art first aid kit. I'm here to do both. This is just kind of think of it like an optional side quest. I'll get a bonus if I manage to pass it off. How much? I'm not gonna tell you that. I smirked. If you don't, I'll tell Aunt Grace that it's full of drugs and other illegal shit. He frantically looked around to see if anyone was nearby who might be listening in. After confirming there was nobody, he sighed and leaned in. Fine. $20,000. My eyes went so wide that they must have been visible from orbit. Jared quickly put a finger up to his mouth in a shushing motion, and nodded understandingly. Be cool, dude. Be cool. At that moment, an unpleasant stench filled my nostrils. It was something akin to copper or perhaps rusted iron. After a few seconds, it was joined by a smell akin to raw pork or beef. I shook my head and wrinkled my nose in disgust. Why the hell does it smell like that, dude? Jared looked at me with a hint of confusion before the smell hit him. After a moment, he gagged and pinched his nose. The smell of something akin to vomit joined the other two to create a trifecta of disgust. Once that smell hit, I couldn't help but pinch my nose and do my best to keep my food down. I glanced around to see where the scent could be coming from and noticed that only a few other people seemed to smell it. Most of them on our half of the picnic area. I felt a torrent of liquid splash against my face, which caused me to flinch backwards with surprise. I slowly reached my other hand up to my face, touching a spot on my cheek that felt very wet, and I felt the liquid blood out of my finger. As I moved my hand in front of my face to look at it, though, I didn't see any liquid. The scent of copper was stronger now, so strong that I could smell it through my pinched nose. What the fuck is going on, dude? I asked Jared, but it looked like he'd stopped moving completely. His mouth hung open as if he was about to say something, but he wasn't blinking or even breathing. It was like he had been frozen in time. I looked at the other tables to see that most of the others were seemingly frozen as well. Jared? I called over. Then I felt two hands clasp themselves over my ears, and everything changed. Where Jared had just been, a body was slumped against the table, head completely removed above the jawbone. My hand, which was still hovering in my vision, was covered in what had splashed over me a few seconds ago. Blood. The table behind Jared, which had sat 4 people, now had 4 brutally desecrated bodies in roughly the position they'd been sitting, torn apart and half-eaten. Every table was occupied by the brutalized, headless corpses of my extended family. Nearly 24 bodies, some of which had been torn to pieces. Others mostly intact, seemingly at random. On the left side of my peripheral vision, I caught movement. I slowly turned my head to see something towering over Aunt Grace as she sat at her table, glancing around with her nose plugged to try and discern the origin of the smell of slaughter that surrounded her, but she could not see. She couldn't see the slimy, eel-like body that trailed 40 feet from the water's edge all the way to her table. She couldn't see the part of the body that was towering over her, arched like a cobra about to strike an unsuspecting mouse. She couldn't see the long, cetacean jaw, opened wide like a snake to reveal a maw of crushing molars. The edge of the creature's mouth was coated in blood that dribbled from the maw like saliva. She couldn't see the long, twig-like arms that emerged from either side of the creature, about 3 feet below the head, which ended in thickly webbed, 4-fingered hands, slowly stretching around her in a motion, as if it was about to embrace her in a hug. She didn't notice as the open mouth carefully positioned itself so that her entire head was inside without touching it. And then her head was crushed like a watermelon, gore spraying up the sides of the creature's jaw and speckling the mud around the table red. Her body spasmed briefly before it slumped onto the table. The thing wrapped its arms around her torso and lifted her body up, opening its jaw again and biting down on her sternum with another sickening crunch. It was eating her. I slowly turned around to try and see who had put their hands around my ears. But before I could see them, they pulled their hands away. The world went back to normal. There was no blood. Grace was sitting completely motionless at her seat. I had turned to look at the table behind her, nose still covered. If I couldn't still smell the stench of violent death in my nostrils, I would have easily believed it to have been an incredibly elaborate daydream, psychotic breakdown. I sat motionless for a moment before feeling an invisible arm wrap around my neck and start dragging me backwards. I was pulled off my seat, kicking and silently screaming as I felt another invisible hand cover my mouth. I filled my arms wildly, trying to fight against the figure, but in my panicked state, I just swung my arms pathetically. It pulled me backwards with incredible strength, dragging me towards the closed door of the cabin and then straight through it. Once I was inside the cabin, I felt the invisible assailant let go. As I gasped for air, the smell faded away. Cold reality began to return as I heard the sound of the cabin door locking. I saw Olivia frantically running over to the other side of a dresser that stood next to the door. She started to push it in front of the door with surprising strength. Adrenaline, if I had to guess. She was covered in blood. "Put something in front of the windows!" She barked over to me as she rushed to grab an end table sitting in the corner of the cabin's foyer. I tried to get up, but I couldn't move. My body wasn't responding to my commands. I gasped for air like a fish out of water, but found that each shallow breath only made my lungs feel emptier. Tears ran down my face, causing my vision to blur and my heart to beat faster and faster. My thoughts raced by at an unbearable speed, questions swirling around in my mind like a cyclone. I couldn't think clearly. I was gonna die here. I didn't want to die. I felt the palm of an open hand slam into my cheek with a thunderous boom, leaving in its wake a dreadful stinging sensation. As my head looked to the side, Olivia's other hand ground my jaw and wrenched my head towards her. Her crimson-stained hair dangled in front of her face like a mop, though parts of it had been brushed aside to allow her eyes to pierce through. Her eyes looked manic. Pupils dilated so wide they covered nearly the entire iris as they darted around wildly. Her breathing was short and desperate, much like mine. "Do you wanna fucking die?" she hissed through gritted teeth. "Get up, Zach! Man the fuck up if you want to live!" She let go of my jaw and sprinted past me through the foyer. I slowly started to stand up, doing everything I could to control my breathing. She was right. I couldn't afford to just break down in the foyer with that thing outside. More importantly than that, she was just as panicked as I was. I needed to take stock of my situation. The foyer was connected to 3 rooms. Straight on from the door was a hallway that went under the balcony and led to the kitchen. Left of the foyer was the dining room, and to the right was the living room. I started making notes of the cabin's entry points. The front door was blocked by a dresser, but I wasn't sure if it would hold for very long. 2 windows faced the front of the cabin and 2 adjacent rooms, the dining room and the living room. There were 2 more windows in the living room, one in the downstairs bathroom, one in the kitchen, and a large window above the front door, though I didn't know if the thing could climb up to it. There was a back door in the kitchen and a side door in the laundry room, which branched off from the living room. The windows were my first concern. I frantically looked around for anything that might help before I heard footsteps approaching from the kitchen hallway. I spun around to see Olivia sprinting into the foyer with a toolbox tucked under her arm. She dropped it to the ground and frantically opened it. She reached inside and tossed a pry bar over to me. "Pull up the floorboards! We're using to board up the windows!" She barked over to me as she pulled a hammer and a plastic bag of nails out of the toolbox. I stuck the pry bar in between the large gaps in the rustic floorboards, wedging it against the joist for stability and levering the board up quickly. Olivia wasted no time grabbing the board and rushing towards the dining room window. I tried to pry up another board, sweat loosening my grip on the pry bar as I popped it out of the floor. I heard the pounding of Olivia hammering the first board in as I moved on to the third. I was convinced that at any moment the thing outside would come crashing through a window and rip me apart. The thought made me move faster. That moment never came. After nearly 10 agonizing minutes of pulling up floorboards as Olivia ran from the growing pile to each window, hammering them in one by one, we had finally secured the windows. The doors came next. I glanced over to the living room to see if any objects caught my eye when I spotted a thin bookcase. As I ran through the living room, I stopped for a brief moment to glance out the window. It was still out there, eating. I saw Dylan's little legs sticking out of the creature's mouth as it tilted its head back and swallowed his corpse whole. It was almost enough to make me vomit. The bookcase was perfect for the laundry room's side door. It fit just barely in the narrow space between the washer and dryer, allowing me to push it right against the side door. I stepped back, breathing heavily as I turned to run towards the kitchen. By the time I got there, Olivia was already pushing the party cabinet across the ground. I ran over, grabbing onto the other side and pulling it into position in front of the door. That was it, the last entrance. We were safe for now, I thought. That notion was quickly shattered when I heard the handle of the front door jiggle. The thing outside had finally finished its feast and was trying to get in. Olivia's head snapped over towards me. "Upstairs, quick!" she whispered. I ran through the kitchen hallway and into the foyer as I heard the jiggling of the doorknob get louder and more frantic. I rushed up the stairs faster than I had ever moved before, with Olivia trailing just behind me. As I reached the second floor, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. I sprinted past several rooms before arriving at my own. I dashed inside, whirling around and grabbing the door. As soon as Olivia entered the room, I slammed the door closed and twisted the lock. I had just enough energy to position myself in front of a beanbag chair in the corner of my room before the adrenaline wore off and I collapsed onto it, exhausted. Olivia put her back against the side of my bed and slid down into a sitting position across from me. Both of us practically became inert for the next several minutes as we slowly regained our strength. Surprisingly, I spoke first, through labored breaths. What happened? I don't know, Olivia muttered. It was all so fast. By the time I knew what was happening, she trailed off, seemingly unable to finish that thought. How did you see it? I inquired. Fucking tinnitus, man, she growled angrily. Acted up, so I covered my fucking ears. That's when I could see it. She leaned forward slowly, brushing her hair out of her eyes and taking a deep breath. It bit his head off, and you didn't even... He just kept talking like he was still there. It went across to my table, so I ran over to you. You were sitting next to Aunt Grace, I realized. Probably on the other side of the table, closer to the cabin, right? She nodded silently. That's why we lived. We were the furthest away from the water. That's where it must have come from. So that means it's just us, Olivia muttered. Let's not think about that right now. We just need to focus on how we can survive with that thing out there. It's sound, she cut in. If we can't hear it, can see what's real. That's why the illusion went away when I covered my ears and when I covered yours. I nodded softly. And why we can see clearly in here. Because there's a wall between us and the sound. How is it doing that? What even is it? It's singing, she stated blankly. I could hear it, just a little with my ears covered. Somehow, the singing makes you see things, or I guess, not see things. I don't know. Probably makes you hear things too, I responded. I've seen movies. People don't just die without making a sound. She nodded slowly. Yeah, which means that unless our ears are covered, we'd have no way to know if those things were right in front of us. Well, it doesn't seem to mess with our ability to feel things or our sense of smell, I countered. It's not a very practical solution, but at least we still have some kind of way to know certain things are, real. Well, that's reassuring, she mumbled. Both of us took some time to digest the information we'd just exchanged, though I'm not quite sure how long it was. The adrenaline rush and intense, prolonged physical workout I had just been through had left me exhausted to the point where I could no longer keep my eyes open. Despite the danger I was still in, I was unable to stop myself from drifting off into a deep, dreamless slumber. When I awoke, the room was covered in a blanket of darkness. It seemed as though I had inadvertently slept for several hours well into the night. It took me a few moments to figure out what had caused me to awaken. The sound of quiet sobbing. I slowly and groggily lifted my head from the beanbag chair, glancing over at the side of my bed to see Olivia with her head pressed into her knees. I sat there for several moments contemplating what exactly I was supposed to do in this situation. I had never seen Olivia cry before. I quietly crawled over towards her and sat down next to her. I didn't know what to say, so I just cautiously put my arm out and wrapped it around her. She flinched slightly before slowly lifting her head up. Her eyes were bloodshot and her hair clung to her face like fur on a wet dog. She darted towards me suddenly, grabbing my shirt collar with both of her hands and pressing her forehead into my sternum. Her sobbing grew to a fever pitch. I slowly moved my head upwards, focusing on a random corner of the room as I lost myself in thought. I didn't feel an explosive outburst of sadness that overwhelmed my senses like Olivia, but I was still deeply affected. I wished in that moment that I could have cried with her, let all of those emotions out immediately, but I couldn't bring a single tear to my eyes. What I felt instead was a silent, unbreakable melancholy, a sense of stoicism that made me want to scream at myself. Almost my entire family was just eaten in front of me, and I couldn't even bring myself to shed a single tear for them. Hell, once we narrowly escaped death, the first thing I did was fall asleep. What the hell? What the fuck was wrong with me? Olivia gripped my collar tighter until her knuckles turned white. She spoke through tears and gritted teeth. You lousy piece of shit. You could have saved him. You could have. For a moment, I thought that she'd been talking to me. I quickly realized, though, that she was talking to herself. Olivia, there was nothing you could have shown a bit more fucking urgency. She choked out. Done a little more than scream. You dumb
fucking blonde.
Olivia.
Or saved your mom. She was right there, Liv. Why didn't you save her? Why didn't you try?
Olivia,
You could have done something. You could have done anything and you would have fucking saved them. They'd still be here if you had just...
Olivia! I roared with an anger in my voice that surprised even me. She flinched backwards like she had been shot in the stomach, letting go of my collar immediately. I'm not gonna sit here and watch you scream at yourself over shit you can't change. I could feel my blood pounding with rage, not at Olivia, but at the fact that she was blaming herself for all this. You didn't know any of this would happen. You didn't want any of this to happen.
I could have done more,
she lamented in response. You could have done more, Olivia, but you didn't. Because you're just a fucking teenage girl who shouldn't have to deal with any of this shit. You can't just...
I could have saved more people. I could have...
You saved someone. And I'm willing to bet that's more than most people would have done. That's all we can say about it, Liv. We can't go back and try again. They're dead. They're dead. All of them are dead. And it's just us. If we die too, nobody will remember what happened to them. She opened her mouth to respond, but words didn't come out. She knew I was right, and that made it worse. There was no way to go back and try again. Please, Olivia. I wouldn't be here without you. You saved my life. That has to count for something in all this. No matter what, we need to get out of here. That comes first. I can't keep going on my own. We need to get it together so we can get out of this. All of the energy in her body seemed to disappear as her shoulders slumped and her head looked forward to stare at the floor. She made no more protestations. I sat there with her for a few minutes as she cried. Eventually, her pitiful sobs faded out into a solemn silence. She mumbled something that I didn't quite hear. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
I'm scared, she muttered.
Me too, I responded honestly. I don't want to die. I know. You won't, I promise. The empty promise felt better than saying, I'll do everything I can. It was kind of amusing in a morbid sort of way that I was the one promising she wouldn't die. She'd been the one to figure out how the singing worked, saved my life, broke me out of a panic attack, and then blocked every door and boarded every window in the cabin. I wouldn't have been able to do any of that without her.
I wish Jared was still here.
She croaked out.
He'd know what to do. Well, then we need to start thinking like Jared.
She nodded slowly and started to shakily get to her feet.
Right. Yeah, Dad hides his guns on top of the dresser in his room and the ammo in his nightstand. If we can get those, well, you saw how huge that thing was, so I don't think a gun will put it down immediately, but it'll probably make him run away or something.
Right, I affirmed. Anything else?
That thing hunts based on sound, yeah? If we can't hear it, we can't get fooled by it. Mom knows about my tinnitus and always packs some earplugs in her purse, even though I keep telling her they just make it worse. If we can get those, we won't have to walk around with our hands over our ears all the time. Alright? Where's her purse? I think I saw it in the living room.
Okay. I'll go down and grab the earplugs, you get the gun.
Okay. She nodded hesitantly before stepping towards me and wrapping me in a tight hug. Stay safe. Please. I crept down the stairs as cautiously as I could, hands firmly pressed over my ears. I half expected the downstairs area to be completely destroyed, but found that nothing had tried to enter the house aside from us. I slowly made my way towards the living room, where I found Aunt Grace's purse sitting on a recliner. I unzipped it and glanced around inside, trying to determine if anything inside would be useful to us. I found the earplugs immediately. 2 pairs. Perfect, I thought. I tried to look around for a phone, but it must have been on her person. Looks like we wouldn't really be able to call for help unless we went outside, which, at the moment, was utterly out of the question. If only either of our parents had been sensible enough to allow me or Olivia to have our own phone, we wouldn't be in this mess. Earplugs in hand, I crept my way back upstairs, when I heard a series of clattering sounds from Aunt Grace's room. I glanced over at the half-open door to see Olivia walk out a few seconds later carrying a pump-action shotgun. My eyes went wide with surprise.
When the hell did your dad get a shotgun?
Come on, Zach, she rolled her eyes. We're a family of Southerners living in a small city next to the swamp. More than half the state owns a gun. Why wouldn't we have a shotgun?
I shrugged my shoulders. How much ammo do we have?
4 shots. You ever fired a gun before?
Can't say I have.
Alright, looks like I'll be the one with the gun.
Can't argue with that. Here's your earplugs. She took them gratefully from my hand and immediately put them in. I followed suit. Okay, what do we do now? I inquired.
We get the fuck out of here.
As we crept back down the stairs, I heard a soft clattering sound from outside. I slowly made my way over to the window, glancing outside to see a balding man in a khaki t-shirt and camo pants, unlatching a large briefcase on the picnic table next to the medkit Jared had been showing me. The man, of course, didn't notice the body slumped against the table right next to him. He opened the briefcase, and I saw a dim blue light emerge from within. It was a laptop disguised as a briefcase. He cracked his knuckles and began to tap his fingers against the keyboard. That was when I saw it again. The creature slowly emerged from the river, the round cetacean head breaching the surface and sending a torrent of water upwards through a hole in the top of its head. A blowhole, I realized. The slick, serpentine body slithered across the ground in an almost rhythmic motion as the thing moved between picnic tables towards the unfortunate man on the laptop. Look behind you!
I screamed at him as I pounded on the window with my fist. He didn't move an inch.
You're in the middle of a graveyard! You're surrounded by corpses!
The man just kept typing on his laptop.
Put your hands over your ears and run away!
I shouted as loud as I could. The eel-like creature slithered right behind him. My heart beat faster and faster.
Run away!
I yelled frantically as cracks started to form in the window from my repeating strikes. The thing stopped right behind him and slowly turned towards me. It brought a webbed hand up to its face and did something that made my veins turn to ice. It put one finger in front of its mouth in a shushing motion. A crooked, bestial smile spread across the glistening face of the horrid creature, like it took pleasure in the fact that I was absolutely helpless to prevent the man's death. The thing hovered its open mouth around the man's head mockingly as its beady black eyes locked with mine. I stepped back from the window, snapping my eyes shut. A moment later, I heard it. I felt Olivia's hand grab the back of my shirt and start hurriedly tugging me away from the window. When I opened my eyes, I saw the thing rapidly gliding towards the cracked window, blood dripping from its chin. I backpedaled with Olivia, quickly making my way back up the stairs while keeping my eyes locked on the window. A second later, I saw the creature slam its head right through the window, shattering the glass, but the boards held strong. As the glass broke, I heard the singing. It was muffled enough by the earplugs that it couldn't mask itself with whatever supernatural power of suggestion it held, but it was loud enough that I could still hear it. It sounded like a series of mournful, drawn-out harmonic vocalizations. Olivia hadn't been lying, it really did sound like singing. The sound only faded out when we slammed the door to my room. As the sound faded out and the feeling of imminent danger lessened, I finally felt tears start to well up in my face. I hadn't cried for my family, but I never had any chance to save them, and it hadn't really sunk in that they were gone yet, but that man... I collapsed into the beanbag chair in defeat as choking sobs began to overwhelm my body. My head filled with 1,000 other things I could have done to save him. I could have broken the window and shot at it. I could have thrown something at him. I could have smashed the window down, pulled down the boards, and ran out there the second I saw him.
There was nothing you could have done, she stated reassuringly. Once you're hearing the song, it can control everything you hear.
She took a deep, sorrowful breath and leaned her head back to stare at the ceiling.
I tried screaming at people when I was covering my ears. I started by screaming warnings at them. Then I started screaming the worst things I could think of about them, unveiling every dirty secret I'd heard at every event I'd ever been to. Nobody heard me. It just kept eating. Even it seemed to ignore me.
The sheer horror of what that thing could do was finally starting to click in my mind. If it hadn't been for dumb luck, it would have killed and eaten all of us. That thing was stronger than us and could directly manipulate our senses. We didn't even stand a chance.
A siren, Olivia muttered. That's what that thing is. The ladies on the rocks in old folk myth that sang to sailors and made them crash their ships or jump overboard. It's just not quite what I expected.
She stopped for a moment to look over at me as I cried. I glanced over at her. Keep talking, please, I begged. I just need to hear someone talk right now. She nodded understandingly before continuing.
It's smart, too. Real damn smart. Though I guess that makes sense. It smashed the window open so we could hear its song. It probably assumed we couldn't hear it because the window was closed. Not only that, it was taunting you. It didn't just kill our only help, it tried to crush your resolve to keep going. It understands humans and what we value, but there's one thing I don't understand about it. Why is it so far inland? All the ancient stories talked about him being on the shore atop jutting rocks or calling to sailors from small islands. Global warming, I sputtered out. Christ on a canoe, she responded. We're gonna fucking die because of oil companies. This ain't the way I thought I was gonna go. I haven't even kissed a cute girl yet.
I slowly sat up, wiping tears from my eyes as I pushed my emotions down. I fucking hate this place, you know. The cabin? She asked half-jokingly.
Atchafalaya. I hate the swamp and the heat and the humidity and the bugs that crawl under my shirt and bite me and the fucking whale eel man thing outside. I've always hated it. Now I think you're starting to understand why. Well, don't lose your head over it, she responded with a mischievous smirk. It was a comment sort of left field, so insensitive, so cosmically dark that I couldn't help but laugh. She sat there with a shit-eating grin as she watched me absolutely lose it with laughter at the irony of what she just said. It wasn't even that funny, I just needed any excuse to laugh after what I'd seen. It took me a few minutes to come back down to earth after that. Once I did, I turned over to her. Thank you, Olivia. I needed that a lot.
You can always count on me, Zach. We're in this together. Once the sun comes up, we're getting out of here.
Why the sun? I questioned.
This thing attacked at night, she responded. It didn't attack us earlier in the day, so it's probably nocturnal. Even if it ain't, most things wouldn't wait out for so long to catch 2 more bodies, and they've already got 24 meals lined up on the ground. Even if it does wait that long, it'll eventually get tired and have to sleep. Plus, she paused for a moment, rubbing her temples. You don't want to be out in the swamp late at night. Gators will hunt during the day if they have to, but they prefer to hunt at night. Even if we escape the siren, we might still get chewed up by a hungry gator or step on a cottonmouth or something. It's just safer to go during the day.
So, what do we do for now?
Stand watch, she stated calmly. You got some nice shut-eye. I haven't got that yet. Been running on fumes for a few hours. I'm going to sleep with the earplugs in.
I nodded. Night, Olivia. Night, Zach. The rest of the night was fairly uneventful. I stood watching the banister overlooking the foyer, shotgun in hand, but the siren never tried to enter the home. Occasionally, I could see it peering through the windows to check if we had left somehow, but it never tried anything more extreme than lightly testing the integrity of our door barricades. Still, even as the sun came up, it stuck around. Olivia came out of my room about 7 a.m. if I had to guess. She'd gotten maybe 5 hours of sleep at most, but that was better than nothing. As she stepped out of my room, I handed the gun over to her. Alright, this thing's been peeking into the windows all night. What's the plan?
The plan is simple, she responded without missing a beat. It stays out near the front, so we leave through the back door or the side door in the laundry room. Now, the laundry room door is going to be harder to open, so we leave through the back door in the kitchen. From what I've seen, that thing isn't very fast, even when it was charging towards the window. We can outrun it. If we go the opposite direction of the Atchafalaya River's flow, we'll go north and get to some kind of civilization within a few hours. Does that sound like a plan?
I nodded. Let's do it. I moved down the stairs behind Olivia. Once she got to the bottom, she swiveled the shotgun around at the interior to check for any possible intruders, but found none. I glanced out the broken front window and saw the siren emerge from the water. At the same time, I heard the whale-like siren song start up again. It slowly slithered towards the window, stopping just short of the boards themselves as it observed us. Olivia had been correct about how slow it was. It seemed to max out at a light jog. We could easily outrun that. This thing was an ambush predator, which meant that it wasn't used to long, drawn-out confrontations like this. That was our advantage, and we were about to leverage it to escape. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I turned to walk with Olivia towards the blockaded kitchen door, my mind swirled with a couple questions. Why hadn't it tried to break in? definitely had the strength to get through the window boards. Olivia began to push the party cabinet away from the door. I turned around to see the siren still staring at us from the front window down the hallway. It made no attempt to move. Something was very wrong. It wasn't an illusion, of course. We still had our earplugs in, but something about the way it made no attempt to chase after us told me that we weren't considering something. Olivia finished pushing the cabinet out of the way and reached her hand out to unlock the door. At that moment, I pinned what had been bugging me about all this. How was it singing and eating at the same time? That shouldn't have been possible. The singing should have stopped, even if it was only for a moment. Unless it wasn't the one singing. Click. The door unlocked. I spun around, opening my mouth to say something, but Olivia realized our mistake, and the knob started to turn before she had even touched it. There were 2 of them. The door swung open, and the second siren craned its head downwards to slither inside. It was smaller than the other one, but it had a much more narrow, pointed jaw that I could imagine being more useful for conflict. Olivia moved to raise the shotgun, but in the moment of surprise, she was too slow. The creature descended upon her, slamming her to the ground and sending the shotgun clattering across the floor towards me. I scrambled to grab it as I heard a horrifying crunch, followed by a scream of pain. I swung the shotgun upwards towards the thing to see it ripping off Olivia's left arm. Without any hesitation, I aimed up towards the head and fired the shotgun. The kick sent me sprawling backwards onto the ground as the back of the gun slammed into my chest and cracked a rib. The siren roared in pain as blood sputtered from the side of its body in a polka dot pattern. Shit, I didn't aim high enough. Though it didn't appear badly injured, it retreated from the home quickly, slamming the door closed behind it. I bolted to my feet, completely ignoring the horrible pain in my chest as I slammed my body into the door and twisted the lock. I glanced towards the front door frantically to see that the larger siren was still watching us. I looked down at Olivia to see her desperately clutching her bleeding arm as her face started to turn white. She slowly turned her head over towards me and stared in terror. She didn't want to die. A medkit, I thought. That could save her. I whirled around and, without wasting a second, rushed from the kitchen to the foyer. The larger siren shrunk back slightly in surprise as I raised my shotgun towards it and screamed in anger. It had been moving with a cold, calculated demeanor. And so had we. Now that we were cornered, however, I had no option but to blindly rush the thing and fire. I did exactly that. The shotgun pellets tore through the wooden boards like paper mache and ripped into the siren's face. It shrunk backwards, putting its hands over its eyes and roaring in pain. This was my chance. I leapt through the broken window with a roar, charging towards the picnic table where the laptop, briefcase, and medkit sat. In one quick motion, I grabbed the medkit and immediately turned around, not a moment too soon either, as the siren slammed into the picnic table, sending splinters and chunks of wood in every direction with its immense strength. I dove back through the window, narrowly avoiding a desperate swiping claw from the siren as it gave chase. I pulled myself to my feet, shotgun in one hand and medkit in the other, as I beelined it straight towards Olivia. I saw the smaller one bashing its head against one of the kitchen windows, but that didn't matter right now. She was bleeding out quickly. As I reached her, it looked like she'd lost consciousness. I desperately opened the medkit, only to be met with the most confusing thing I'd ever seen. The medkit was almost entirely empty. All that was inside was a single syringe held in a glass case that was bolted to the bottom of the box. I felt a rush of frigid air escape from inside of the box, which collected ice crystals around the reflective steel interior. I heard the sound of a board snapping and looked up to see the dagger-faced siren worming its way inside. I tucked the shotgun under my arm and picked up Olivia's unconscious body with significant effort as the thing began to slide across the floor towards me. I raced into the foyer, horrid creature hot on my tail as I narrowly sidestepped the hole we'd created pulling up the floorboards the night prior. I stumbled up the stairs frantically as the apex predator stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I glanced back for a moment to see it struggling to ascend the stairs. Good. I barreled into my room, slamming the door open with my shoulders before everything tumbled out of my hands. Olivia's body fell to the ground in the center of the room, a steady stream of blood tracking her path across the floor like paint dripping from a bucket. I slammed the door closed behind me and locked it before looking at the medkit. There had to be something I'd missed. Anything. I stuck my hand inside and desperately wrenched a glass case out of the bottom of the box before removing the syringe. The massive syringe was filled with a mostly clear liquid that had a slight pinkish hue. The liquid reflected light against its surface in a rainbow of colors like oil shimmering in the sun. Across the syringe was a massive label with words that read, AN-SUB-52, Ambrosia, 75% purity, Origin, PJKT, Ember, Contamination risk, minimal. Inject only in case of lethal injury. Do not inject into Class 0 civilians. See Roskin's Law. With no other choice, I grabbed Olivia's right arm and found a vein. I haphazardly shoved the syringe beneath her skin and pressed down on the piston, injecting the liquid into her bloodstream. I didn't know how much I was supposed to administer, but that didn't matter. I kept pressing down until the syringe was empty. Within just 2 or 3 seconds, the bleeding stopped completely. Then her entire body started to twitch. I heard a sickening, bone-snapping sound as I glanced over to her missing arm and watched as bone began to grow from it like a sapling. New muscle and tissue formed shortly after the bone as it crawled upwards in a stalk-like shape. As I kept watching, I saw the individual bones of a human arm form from the chaotic mess of marrow and sinew. I had expected the syringe to just be some kind of highly advanced blood-clotting agent. But this was so much more. Her arm was regrowing. How was that even possible? It took about 30 seconds for the interior to fully regrow. After that, flesh began to race up the skinless arm like bubbling tar. I even saw the carpet below her arm begin to sizzle and turn black from the heat. A heat I could feel pressing against my skin even from a distance of about 6 feet. The flesh started to cool once it coated the arm like batter on a chicken wing, hardening around it and completing its transformation. Her arm was back, perfectly identical to what it was supposed to look like. I glanced at her face to see something else. A small scar on her chin that had existed since we were kids had disappeared. Her eyes shot open and frantically glanced around the room. She moved her arm up in front of her face, bewildered. What? How? I don't know. I grabbed this medkit that Jared had been hiding from everyone, and there was a syringe inside of it that said to inject in case of lethal injury, so I injected it and your fucking arm grew back. Oh. Okay, I guess. Fucking Christ, everything hurts. My whole body feels like it's burning. Yet, I'd expect that. I heard something heavy slam against the door. I whirled around just in time to see the smaller siren wrench the door from its hinges and toss it over the banister behind it. Olivia grabbed the shotgun from the ground and leveled it at the thing quickly, bracing it against her shoulder. It swung its claws at me, and I dove to the ground. Not a moment later, she fired. The thing roared in pain as it shrunk backwards, leaning its head against the railing. Unlike me, she'd landed a direct hit. She quickly pulled herself to her feet, pumping the shotgun before she strode out of the room and towards it. It opened its mouth, letting out a sorrowful singing cry, before she fired one more time, directly into its forehead. The pointed head of the thing shattered like an egg thrown against a wall, and blood and gore flew outwards in all directions. I slowly brought myself to my feet and opened my mouth to speak. What emerged from my mouth, rather than words, was a sudden cry of pain. I glanced down slowly to see that my dive hadn't exactly left me unscathed. A massive gash had opened in my torso from the thing's claws, and blood was rolling down my stomach like honey dripping from a hive. I slowly looked up at Olivia. Her face was one of desperation and despair.
Zach. No.
I reached a hand down to the gash just above my intestines, lightly pressing against it as I felt warm blood coat my fingers. I took my hand away to find it covered in a thick crimson. My legs quickly gave way, causing me to fall backwards and sit against the foot of my bed. I didn't feel any of the emotions I expected to, knowing that I would likely die within the next several minutes. Instead, an overwhelming sense of calm washed over me. This was how it ended. It's okay, Olivia.
Like hell it is!
She dashed over towards me. She kneeled down, frantically tearing away the bottom half of my left pant leg and pressing the fabric against my abdomen as forcefully as she could. The fabric quickly began to turn deep shades of red. We did the best we could, given the circumstances, I stated. I think Jared would be proud of us.
No, shut the fuck up! She demanded. We're getting out of this. We're so close, Zach.
I heard a distant mechanical whirring sound. At first, I thought it was an auditory hallucination caused by my immense blood loss, until I noticed that Olivia's head had snapped up and looked around for the noise as well.
That's a fucking helicopter. That's a fucking...
Slightly cheerful proclamation was interrupted by a loud, mournful wail. She glanced over at the banister and I followed suit. The larger siren was hovering over the dead body of the smaller one. The head was hung low in sorrow. It was grieving. They were a pair of hunters, but looking at the way it grieved, something told me they had been more than that. Run, Olivia, I croaked out. While you still have time. The helicopter's roar got louder. The siren's head snapped over towards us, and it let out a cry of anger as it started to slide closer.
Go!
I screamed at her as it reached the doorway. After one last glance down at me, she turned and ran for the window. She started to unlatch it. The siren kept slithering past me, intent on killing the only one of us that could actually escape. Piece of shit, I uttered out. Your entire species are pond-swimming scum. Taunting it was the only thing I could do. I could draw its attention away from Olivia just long enough for her to escape. I just needed it to take the bait. Gave no reaction, opening its mouth wide as it closed in on Olivia. Slime-bellied freak! Murderer! I screamed at the horrid creature as it arched its back, ready to strike like a cobra. I only had one more chance, so I took a gamble. It felt good, watching your mate die. It stopped. This thing understood human speech, and, more importantly, the meaning behind the words I was saying. I knew a little bit about animals, generally speaking, and the trends they tended to follow. In hunting pairs, the females usually ate more than the males at specific times in their lives. From everything I had seen of these creatures, this was probably one of those times. I had a sneaking suspicion that the male was the one who'd been taking all the risks earlier and died for it. So that meant there was one thing I could say that would set this thing off more than anything else. I will kill your unborn child. The siren slithered away from Olivia and over towards me. I watched Olivia from the corner of my vision as she opened the window and climbed out. She was gone. She made it. What? You're upset? You just killed my whole family, you fucking freak. The thing slithered closer, slowly opening its mouth. I heard the helicopter's roar become deafeningly loud. I saw the cypress trees outside start to sway in the wind, being thrown around by the rotating blades. The siren reached forward, gingerly with its webbed hands, removing the orange earplugs from my ears. It opened its mouth and began to sing. Words floated into my mind.
Your kind are savage wretches who spit upon her gift of life. What we do is her eternal will.
It was using the power of illusion to communicate with me. I was too weak to respond.
In the end, Sapien, all things are returned to the Mother of Lies.